Good evening. My name is Keisha Rogers, and I want to thank you for joining us for the Monday, December 1st strategic discussion and overview. And we'll be joined tonight in a discussion by Tony Pappard. And a little bit later on, Ryan Lance is going to come in and to participate in the discussion. What I want to do is Tony just wrote a very important article, and I want to post that article up here for you on the site. Just give me 1 second so people can look at it. And I will also post it in the chat as well for people who can see the chat. So, the title of the article that Tony, and I believe that Michael Stager co authored this article with him as well, is entitled H-1B Visa Atrocities and Generation Z. And I think the opening of it and the opening question of the article highlights the importance of this article and what we're seeing right now in terms of what our young people are facing in what is required of an absolute transformation in our economic perspective. I'll just read the opening here for people who can't see this. The opening question states a generation raised amid broken homes, economic collapse, and endless war now faces a final insult being placed by foreign workers in their own country. The H-1B visa scandal reveals a deeper question. Will America invest in its youth or abandon them? That is the question that we're going to be discussing tonight, and the question of how America under President Trump will be investing in America's youth, in Generation Z, and bringing about a transformation of our workforce and bringing about the ability for this generation to participate productively in society in the United States. So, with that, we'll have more discussion. I'm going to take this down, and I want to go ahead and bring Tony in to the discussion, or he's going to highlight a little bit more of that report, but dig a little bit deeper into this question that was just raised. So let me get him on here. And
Great.
Tony, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Keisha. The we're at war, and war changes for good everybody who participates in war. This third American Revolution, and that's what it is, after our revolution of the 1700s and then the Civil War of the mid 1800s, which was effectively a second American Revolution. This third American Revolution under Donald Trump is bringing profound cultural changes to the United States right now as we're sitting here and talking. What C.S. Lewis called men without chests in his book, The Abolition of Man, it was written about 1945. Men without chests are giving way to men with chests. It's inspired by the example of President Trump and the leaders he's gathered around him in his cabinet and other people he's rallied. So the question today, one question, an important question, which we're going to be talking about, is will Americans once again be able to develop the kind of character we saw in the revolutionary generation of the late 1700s and in our Civil War generation of the middle of the 1800s. So that's what is the overarching question, to my view, which stands over and above what we're going to be discussing about the H-1B visa and the rising Generation Z. The H-1B visa that was introduced basically in 1990 And the declared purpose was to bring over from foreign countries workers with special skills, basically white collar workers with special skills who could not be found in the United States, to bring technological capabilities we otherwise wouldn't have. So that's what the law says is the purpose, but the reality has been totally other. Uh, the It's been used to bring over workers en masse into especially IT companies, to lay off U.S. workers by the tens of thousands. It's been used, it was intended, as you know, the very name of it is the H-1B temporary visa, but in fact, it was made into a permanent visa, which was renewed indefinitely, leading to green card status, permanent residency, so that the people who came over under the so-called temporary visa program have stayed permanently. And since the concentration of the visas is in IT computers, there's an estimate, a well-founded estimate, that in 2018, 3/4 of the jobs in Silicon Valley were held by non-citizens. Now, at the same time, we have the picture of Generation Z, the rising generation of Americans born roughly between 1997 and 2012. And Mike has discussed this in a succession of these Monday shows. And again, he contributed to this article. We both wrote about it. The Gen Z tend to refer to themselves as the no future generation. Uh, the no jobs generation. I mean, one prominent representative of this generation, Nayland Haley, the son of Nikki Haley, did recent interviews with Tucker Carlson and Sohrab Ahmari. If you go to my article, it links to those two interviews. But in those interviews, he says among his group of student friends at his top college where he went, they've all graduated, and now none has a job. None has a job using their credentials that they got, except for him, actually. He's the only one of his whole group who has such a job. Most of them believe it or not, I mean, this is in America today, 2025, most of them believe they're never going to be able to buy a home. They're never going to be able to raise a family. And the millennials, the preceding generation, yet the millennials, the preceding generation, plus Generation Z, will be over half of the electorate in our presidential election of 2028. So that's the reason I gave for the title I gave to this evening's discussion, is Generation Z the key to the 2026 midterms, and then following that, the 2028 presidential election. Now, I mean, the massive abuse of these H-1B visas is they've been granted at a rate of 100 to 200,000 new visas a year. And then, I mean, those who come here on these visas are generally, almost always renew them. So between the new visas and the renewed visas, or the total number per year is generally 300 to 400,000, plus dependents who are also able to apply for visas. So it's an estimate, I think a low estimate, is that the H-1B visas, as they've been renewed, plus their visas for dependents. And then, at the end of the renewal process, they go for a green card and permanent residence. So an estimate, which may be low, is that this program alone, H-1B, has added 1.3 million people to the U.S. population. Again, it may be actually more than that. The largest applicant, the visas are applied for by employers, and the largest applicants for these visas have always been outsourcing firms. Principally, I mean, the largest applicants have always been from India, and the largest applicants have been Indian outsourcing firms, sometimes more than half of the H-1B visas granted in a year. What outsourcing firms mean is that an American company will fire their entire IT staff, what we used to call computer staff, fire everybody in the department and outsource that work out from their headquarters, typically to India, to lower paid foreign workers in India. And the visas they grant to come over here are Indians to come over here and help the outsourcing process, i.e., facilitate the replacement of the entire IT department by foreigners. And this has been done to the extent of hundreds of thousands of Americans who have lost their jobs to this. Now, another major, and all this is not supposed to happen, of course, at all, the way the law was written, but it's been happening. Another whole area of abuse is entry-level positions. A large part of the visas granted are for entry-level positions. So these are not experienced workers. They're not highly skilled technicians. They're college graduates of some sort, or more advanced degree graduates, but they don't have experience. They're coming in at the entry level, and what are they doing? They're getting jobs which American current graduates, i.e. Generation Z, would otherwise get. They're not able to get those jobs. So the unemployment rate of current graduates of Americans in IT is 7 to 8, well, not necessarily current, it's a year or two old. It was 7 to 8% higher than art history majors, higher unemployment than biology majors. Why? Well, in large part because foreigners are coming to get those jobs cheaper, and they're also more docile and obedient, because when they come over on H-1B visa, it only applies to the employer who brought them over. They can't leave and get another job if they don't like conditions or whatever. They're stuck. So they've been compared, I think rightly, to indentured servants. Now, on the other hand, President Trump is very well aware of all these abuses that I mentioned. In fact, in his proclamation, sort of an executive order of September 19th of this year, on the H-1 visa, he called out each of the abuses I named with a lot of examples. The firing of the entire IT department, American workers forced to train their replacements on pain of not getting severance pay. It happened to tens of thousands of workers. And all the things I said, the American current graduates who can't get jobs because of low-paid, docile foreigners being brought over. So President Trump cited all these things on September 19th because he intends to reverse them. And the immediate action he took on September 19th, which according to the London Telegraph caused a panic in Silicon Valley, was he slapped a $100,000 fee on the employer per H-1B visa. It was not effective immediately, comes into effect in 2026. But clearly, that places is a huge blow on the ability to use these visas for cheap labor. It's not that cheap if you have to start off with a $100,000 payment before you can get the guy over here. And the other thing his Department of Homeland Security has done is they did this back in June or July, is set in motion a regulation, which it has to go through a process before it's in effect. But they set in motion a regulation which would limit entry-level positions to 10% of the 85,000 H-1B visas, which are subject to law or limited, well, to, 8,500, which again would do a tremendous amount to put a stop to these flagrant abuses. So President Trump is aware of these things and is moving against more. It may well be that more should be done. In fact, in our article, Mike and me, we give you links to some people who propose further reforms in the same direction to what President Trump has done. It's likely more should be done, but he's aware of these abuses and he's moving on them, as I said. And there, other questions come up there which we can discuss. The need to bring over foreign workers temporarily to train Americans in the new industries which are coming to the United States through President Trump's program of massive foreign investment. For instance, advanced shipbuilding coming to the Philadelphia shipyards from Hanwha shipbuilders in Korea. So they're building ships, in a way which is a decade or more in advance of what we've done. They want to do that here in Philadelphia. They're going to have to temporarily bring people over from Korea to train our workers. And there's some people suspicious of this, lest, this become a permanent visa as the H-1B has become. But that's not the intention. That's not what President Trump wants to do. So, that's a brief thumbnail of that area of the question. Now, let's turn to Generation Z. Again, born roughly 1997 to 2012. This is so hard to digest for me. I don't know, but fully half of this generation comes from broken homes. It's a terrible way to have to start life, but it's true. We document it in the article. Now, look at the history which has unfolded since these people came into the world, to try to get a look from outside of what has shaped their lives. Right at the beginning, there was September 11th, 2001, the attack on the World Trade Center, which launched 20 years of war. The United States was at war continually for 20 years of the lives of these young men and women. 3 months later, on December 11th, 2001, China was admitted to the World Trade Organization. So in 2001, the United States was already, and had been for many years, in process of deindustrialization, shutting down our factories, moving them overseas. 100,000 factories, if I remember the figure, we've lost. But the admission of China to the WTO, December 11th, 2001, signaled the end, the doom of what little industry we had left. in the United States. Then we move to the great crash of 2008. Millions of Americans lost their homes, whereupon the great crash was followed by the great bailout, where the top 5% or less of the population was bailed out to the extent of trillions, with the result that the country became unaffordable to everybody else, and particularly by today, homes, housing, private housing, home purchases became unavailable to everybody else. So the median age of a first-time home buyer has risen to 40 years of age. So, I mean, starting a family in your own home has become prohibitive for Americans. And then the whole countercultural turn, which, I mean, I tend to think turned especially fast around the time of Obama's second inauguration in 2012, with the predominance of the Me Too movement, the Black Liberation Movement, DEI, LBGTQ plus, or what President Trump rightly calls transgender for everybody. All these things were introduced and intensified and intensified and intensified all the way into the Biden administration, so that white men became bad deplorables. As we wrote in the article, they became the only minority with no rights, only wrongs. And if that wasn't enough, we went ahead into the insane COVID lockdowns. So this Generation Z, typically at some stage of their education during those lockdowns, were locked into their homes, basically no education, no socialization, and went on in many cases to college, as they were told to do, to fall tens of thousands of dollars into debt, sometimes even $100,000 or more into debt, and typically be unable to get a job that their degree prepared them for. And then, the the escalation in home prices. So the average new car manufactured now, I believe, carries a $50,000 price tag. So, you can understand that these people, especially young men, feel they're never going to be in a position to own a home or raise a family. And no surprise, they listen to somebody like Nick Fuentes, who is, I mean, in my opinion, he's close to demonic, frankly, but he's very well spoken, and he knows, what he's appealing to and what he's speaking to. So now the future of our country, in my view, depends on our commitment to elevate our own system, our own citizens, educate them, train them, make them highly educated and highly productive, not seek to replace them with foreigners. The H-1B visa abuse has got to be demonstratively shut down to demonstrate that commitment. We have to develop our Generation Z to the highest rank of knowledge, education, technology, and science. Now, I mean, there's massive opportunities for them in the economic revolution which Trump is bringing about right now as we're speaking. In fact, many don't know this, many don't understand it. I mean, not just Generation Z. Many Americans have no notion of this. I mean, this is one great contribution which Brian has made and which he'll continue this Saturday at the same hour when he teaches our Saturday Promethean Action class. And President Trump is also going to conduct a national tour to bring this home to Americans. This is extremely important as well. There's got to be much more knowledge. I mean, we have all over the country Republican candidates who are running for office and, in fact, have no idea of the new investments, new industries, new jobs, new factories that are coming to their own states and their own areas under President Trump's program with, trillions of foreign investment bringing this about. And then, I mean, as we noted in our article, it's not government alone. The development, the education, development, training of coming generations is a task of the whole of society and indeed a task of everybody in society. Industry is equally involved along with government. I mean, as we said there, Ford and General Motors should go to the University of Michigan, which has tremendous science and engineering programs, and tell them what they need in the way of knowledge, training for their work for America. And offer to University of Michigan that if University of Michigan can help with these things, they'll help the university. And in turn, University of Michigan should go down to the high schools and convince them to go to literacy, numeracy, forget teaching about sex, forget DEI, educate our students as they're not being educated. They're being sent to college, many of them, illiterate and ignorant of middle school mathematics. I mean, if you want to document that, it's freely available. So we've got to achieve a revolution in education, among many other things. I mean, in that regard, I would cite the inspiring example of the Mississippi Miracle. Some of you may be aware of this, others not. But between 2013 and 2023, Michigan moved from number 49 in the 50 states in the educational achievement of its eighth graders, from number 49 out of 50 to number 1, according to some reliable measures. And, according to all measures, it moved from the bottom 10 of the 50 states to the top 10. And this can be done. I mean, people said, this is Mississippi. Are you crazy? We're poor. We're, the only state in the union which is majority Black. How can we do this? Well, they did it. And poor people in Mississippi are far more literate and skilled in mathematics today, K through 12 and so on, than in any other state. So it can be done. I mean, just to conclude, perhaps it seems far afield, I don't know. But, I mean, to me, the kind of dedication we need, it reminds me of the organization I'm sure many of you have heard of, called the Brothers of the Common Life. During the Christian Renaissance, and the Brothers of the Common Life centered in the Low Countries, the Netherlands, in Northern Europe. And It was an organization which typified the entirety of the Renaissance in that the Renaissance, whether Northern or Southern, really it was a Christian Renaissance, which discovered uh, depths and resources and truths in Christianity, which had never been discovered before in the whole history of Christianity. Discovered new truths of Christianity. And the Brothers of the Common Life were dedicated to education, particularly education of boys, but also of girls. Uh, the, they transformed education generally, not only in the Netherlands, but throughout Western Germany. And when we talk of the German Humboldt program in education, which was the official program of German education up to and beyond World War II, which was an extraordinary uh, richness of education, really not achieved elsewhere in the world, that stemmed back from the Christian Renaissance, the Brothers of the Common Life, and their uh, revolutionization of education in the Low Countries. They insisted that the Bible, of course, and also classical works, including classical works of so-called pagan uh, classics, be available to common people, and therefore huge programs of translation into the vernacular language, not only of the Bible and sacred writings, but also, as I said, of secular writings. And it was this movement that flowed into the Pilgrims and Puritans who first settled North America and who did a lot to give us the character which won our revolution. So, I mean, it was this influence that caused the fact that literacy in New England at the time of our revolution was 85 to 95% among men and 60 to 80% among women, which was the highest literacy among women in the world, and twice that of England, the mother country. So the that I wanted to lay out for a beginning, and let's see if people would like to discuss it.
All right. 1 second. Okay, very good. Thank you, Tony. Yes, I want to bring people in just a moment here. I I want to check to see if we have questions. Of course, one of the first written questions that came in was, "Can we get rid of that visa?" And yeah, I think we can answer that in a few moments. Before I take questions, I do want to let people know that if you are in this is your first time getting on and you want to ask a question or make a comment, you can press *9 to get into the queue if you're on the phone line there, and then press *6 when I call on you to unmute yourself and then tell us your first name and where you're calling from. Before I go directly to questions, though, I did want to bring in Brian because he's been looking at this from a little bit of a expanded angle on the question of what's happening with the workforce of the Gen Z and young people. So before I go to questions, go ahead and start lining up though, and I'll take you guys in a few moments here. But I wanted to let Brian respond a little bit and maybe add some further thoughts on this subject.
Well, just to start with, it's reported that 25% of the hires in the skilled trades now are 18 to 25-year-olds. And I think, that indicates that we're already making headway. The Trump administration is already making headway um, in cutting through this post-industrial green ideology, which was used to kill off skilled trades as a honorable profession. That's just in terms of my own thinking about it. But the more profoundly, I mean, of course, have a huge labor problem in the country, and President Trump is absolutely committed to addressing it. There's the president, the cabinet, with the backing of the Congress. There's now the Make America Skilled Again, MASA, if you will, Make America Skilled Again grant program, block grant program to the states. This is a reorganization of some 11 federal labor training programs. And rather than being spread out over the federal bureaucracy, focusing it as block grants to the states, but not to the states per se. It's through the states to then reward private companies that engage in training up, retraining, or training new young workers to enter the workforce. So this money is going out. The first portions of this $3 billion that's in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So that's the Make America Skilled Again block grant program. And so you have money going into the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity to support shipbuilding, the Maine Department of Labor for aerospace and shipbuilding, the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce, and so on and so forth. So this is, a very important element in addressing, beginning to address. Just to give you an idea, it's expected that there's going to be a shortage in manufacturing of 2.1 million workers by 2030. This is not new. The aerospace defense sector has been talking about this for most of the last decade, that this was coming on. You've basically got 5 people going out for every 2 people coming in. That is 5 people retiring for every 2 people entering the workforce. But in addition, the requirement of 400,000 technicians, 400,000 factory workers. Right now, there's a shortage of 313,000 slots to be filled. In the durable goods sector, that's the heavy industry side of our manufacturing in the United States. 500,000 needed right now in construction. Construction is homes, but it's also factories, and factories is expanding very rapidly. 20,000 additional jobs, Secretary Besson pointed out, just in the September figures that just became available. So the requirements are significant, not just significant; they're major, and really threaten a catastrophe. We're not able to bridge this gap, and so the question of Generation Z and even Generation Alpha, the generation coming after it, the generation born between roughly 2013 and 2025, that's Generation Alpha or Gen Alpha. Becomes extremely important in terms of orienting them towards a productive future, productive jobs, but careers, productive careers, as the labor secretary calls it, mortgage paying jobs that earn enough to pay the mortgage on a house. So I think this is all very important, but also the size of this shortage, 5 going out for every 2 coming in, I think really underscores the need to dig deeper. We're going to have to go deeper, peeling or going through layers. Okay, we start at the low hanging fruit. We reorient. I mean, now because of the attention given to the subject of skilled trades, both as honorable but also as a shortcut to a mortgage paying a future. The 70% there's different polls, but 70% of Generation Z is considering skilled trade jobs or engaged. 42%, according to some one study, 42% of Generation Z is currently working in or pursuing a blue collar or skilled trade job. So we're that's happening. There's a shift occurring as a result of President Trump. Really, just an example of vocational training at community colleges, enrollment in 2024. That was the election year. That was the year that led up to and through President Trump's election. Increased by 16% in 1 year in 2024. Vocational training at community colleges. So community colleges are reorienting in that fashion. So that's all very well and good, but we've got you may be familiar with this, the term NEETs, not in education or employment or training. NEETs. That is, they're on the sidelines. They're in somebody's basement, maybe their parents' basement, maybe their grandparents' basement, living, playing video games. I mean, that's the stereotype. But they're out of the workforce. These are among young men, particularly damaged in the way that Tony Papert was just developing. Mike Steger and Tony develop it further in their article. So that's 4 million plus. We have 2.5 million unemployed right now in the United States among between the ages of 16 and 24. The NEETs are also thought about in terms of this age grouping, 16 to 24, 15 to 24 NEETs. But the 2.5 million, in addition to the 4 million, those are people looking for work. They may not have skills, but they're looking for work. They're actively looking for work. Young men in particular. And there's the broader question of poverty. 10%, 11, 12% of the U.S. population is living below the poverty level. 25% of that is youth, young adults. Well, that's roughly what you get. That's roughly the 7 to 8 million people that coincides with NEETs plus those unemployed that are looking for jobs plus some more. So this is what we're talking. We're talking about the underclass in the United States that was impoverished by the disintegration of the U.S. economy, the controlled disintegration under Paul Volcker, the Federal Reserve, Council on Foreign Relations policies, the green policies. And of course, there's an earlier history to it as well. But the entire industrial heartland of the United States was hollowed out with the creation of enormous pockets of poverty. This is rural. In fact, as much rural as it is urban in terms of these numbers of people living under the poverty level. This is where something along the lines of a space CCC, which is what I proposed back in 2020 and thereabouts and wrote about and actually proposed to the Workforce Commission that the Department of Labor and Commerce set up under the first Trump administration, a space CC program modeled or taking inspiration from the CCC program in the 1930s and early 40s. That, you know, in other words, we have to address underclass has been kicked to the curb. Not just address it, but we got to bring them into productive employment. For these young men and women, a job is a lifeline. It's incredibly important to them, and it's important now to the country, to the national security of the country. This underclass essentially over time be erased. So that's a work in progress. That's going to be a work in progress over time. But I think that's an additional element looking to the future and looking also, as I said, to Gen Alpha, that we've got to begin working on or have our thinking about now. That's what I would add at this moment. I hope that's useful.